What if I told you that right now, hidden deep within America, are prisons that no one talks about? Prisons that the government doesn't want you to know exist. These are not the ones you've heard about in the news, not the ones shown in documentaries. These are secret, off-the-books prisons operating in the shadows, with no oversight and little to no accountability. Imagine a place where people are locked away without anyone knowing where they are and no one asking what's happening inside. Hard to believe? Well, it's happening. From CIA black sites to private facilities running in total secrecy, there's a whole hidden world of prisons in America that most of us never even hear about. In this video, we're pulling back the curtain on these secret prisons and uncovering the disturbing truths behind them. Stick around till the end, because what you're about to learn might change the way you think about the U.S. prison system forever. Have you ever wondered how many prisons there are in the U.S.? It's more than you might think. The truth is, America holds the record for having the most prisoners in the world, with over 2 million people behind bars. That's 1 in every 100 adults. But what if I told you that many of the prisons you know about are only the tip of the iceberg? You see, the U.S. prison system is vast, complex, and in many ways hidden from the public eye. When we think about prisons, we imagine massive, well-known facilities like San Quentin or Rikers Island. But what if I told you that some prisons are intentionally kept out of sight? These aren't the places we talk about on the news or see in movies, but they're just as real, and in some cases, even more disturbing. Now, why does this matter to you? Well, hidden prisons mean less transparency, and that often leads to mistreatment, corruption, and human rights violations. But don't worry. You're about to learn why some of these prisons are so secretive and what's really going on behind closed doors. Stick with me until the end, and I'll show you how the prison system in America is not what it seems. You won't believe what's been kept under wraps. So, what exactly makes a prison secret? Well, these aren't your typical, well-known correctional facilities. Secret prisons are the ones that fly under the radar, hidden away from the public eye, sometimes even from the law. They're not advertised, and their very existence is often denied or downplayed by those in power. You might be thinking, how can a prison exist without people knowing about it? It sounds almost impossible, right? But it happens more often than you think. These secret prisons are deliberately kept off the books for several reasons, usually to avoid public scrutiny or, even worse, accountability. While most people are familiar with the general prison system in the U.S., there are a significant number of facilities that are either unreported or deliberately concealed. Let's take a step back. Throughout history, the U.S. has used hidden prisons to keep certain activities out of the public's view. Some have been around for decades, operating in the shadows. These prisons are sometimes classified under other names, like detention centers or military facilities, so they don't raise alarms. But just because they're not in the spotlight doesn't mean they aren't operating. In fact, these hidden facilities can often operate with less oversight, which leads to serious questions about what goes on inside. Imagine, for a moment, a place where people are detained with no trial, no rights, and no one even knows where they are. That's what these secret prisons can become: dark, hidden corners where the law doesn't always apply. By the end of this video, you'll have a clearer picture of how these places exist and why they're so hard to track down. Trust me, you're about to discover a side of America's prison system that most people never talk about. Let's dive deeper into one of the most notorious examples of secret prisons, the CIA black sites. These aren't your average prisons. In fact, many of them aren't prisons at all, at least not in the traditional sense. These sites are secret locations where the U.S. government detains suspected terrorists, spies, and other high-value targets, often without following the usual legal processes. Black sites are known for being off the radar, so much so that even their exact locations are often kept secret, even from the public. You won't find these on any map, and the government rarely, if ever, acknowledges their existence. They operate outside the normal prison system and usually involve high-level intelligence operations. The purpose? To conduct interrogations, gather intelligence, and, often, engage in practices that would be considered illegal or unethical in a typical prison. One of the most famous black sites was located in Eastern Europe, But it's believed that some of these secret prisons have also been set up on U.S. soil, though the government denies this. These sites are often associated with controversial tactics like torture and prolonged detention, which have sparked international outrage. The people held there typically have no legal rights, and their families may not even know where they are. Why all the secrecy? Well, these black sites operate in a gray area of the law, often using national security as a reason to bypass regular legal processes. In the eyes of the government, keeping them hidden helps protect the country's security interests, but in the eyes of human rights activists, it's an ongoing violation of basic freedoms. By now, you should start to see the bigger picture. Black sites are just one example of how the U.S. has created an invisible prison system, where the rules are bent or even ignored. And it doesn't stop here. There are more secret prisons out there, and the next ones might surprise you. Now let's talk about private prisons, an often overlooked part of the prison system in the U.S. While the government runs many prisons, private companies also operate thousands of correctional facilities. These private companies profit from housing prisoners, and because of the way they're structured, these prisons often operate with a level of secrecy and lack of transparency. You might be wondering, how can a private company run a prison, and why would they want to hide anything? The answer lies in profit. Private prisons are in business to make money, and that means they have less incentive to be open about their operations. The more prisoners they house, the more they make, and that often leads to corners being cut, whether it's in how the prisoners are treated, the conditions they live in, or how transparent the company is about what happens inside. The secrecy comes from the fact that these private prisons are not subject to the same level of public scrutiny as state-run prisons. Many of them operate behind closed doors, sometimes without any real public oversight. You won't always find detailed reports on these places, and getting accurate information about conditions or incidents inside can be nearly impossible. Some of these private prisons may even hide facilities in plain sight. They may be listed as detention centers or have generic names that don't sound like prisons at all. The goal? To avoid drawing attention to what's going on behind those walls. And because these companies have contracts with the government, there's very little incentive for them to be fully transparent with the public. Behind this veil of secrecy, there are serious concerns: overcrowding, lack of medical care, mistreatment of prisoners, and reports of abuse. But because these facilities operate in the shadows, many of these issues go unnoticed unless someone blows the whistle. In the coming sections, we'll uncover just how deeply the issue runs and why some of these private, hidden prisons are such a problem. The secrecy is not just for the benefit of those who run the prisons. It's a system that impacts the lives of those who end up inside. Moving on, let's talk about another area where secrecy thrives in the U.S. prison system: immigrant detention centers. In recent years, the number of immigrants detained in the U.S. has skyrocketed, and along with this surge comes an increase in hidden facilities that most people never hear about. These aren't the overcrowded public detention centers you see on the news, but private, often undisclosed facilities where the conditions are grim and the stories go untold. Immigrant detention centers are supposed to be temporary holding facilities for people waiting to be processed or deported. But for many, this process takes months or even years, leaving them stuck in these facilities for long stretches of time. While some of these detention centers are out in the open, others are intentionally kept low-key, sometimes operating under different names or even being classified as something else entirely. For example, they might be labeled as processing centers or temporary housing, which doesn't give the public the full picture of what's actually going on inside. The problem with these hidden detention centers is that they're often difficult to track. Families can't always find where their loved ones are being held, and the general public is often kept in the dark. As a result, these centers can operate without much oversight, which allows for abuse, neglect, and questionable practices to go unnoticed. There have been countless reports of poor living conditions, lack of access to proper health care, and even allegations of physical and verbal abuse in these hidden centers. In addition to this, some centers are run by private companies that, much like in the case of prisons, are more interested in making a profit than ensuring humane treatment. This profit motive has led to situations where individuals, some of them fleeing violence in their home countries, are subjected to inhumane conditions while their cases are processed behind closed doors. The secrecy surrounding these facilities only makes it harder to hold anyone accountable for the mistreatment that takes place inside. As we move forward, you'll see just how deeply entrenched this system of secrecy is and why it's such a major issue that many people are still unaware of. These hidden detention centers are just another part of America's invisible prison system, and they're only the beginning of the dark story we're about to uncover. Now, let's take a look at another unsettling layer of the secret prison system: military prisons. These facilities are a whole different ballgame. Unlike regular state or federal prisons, military prisons are specifically designed to house individuals who are involved in military operations or national security matters. And while most of them are located overseas, there are some that are actually on U.S. soil, and many of these are shrouded in secrecy. One of the most famous examples is Guantanamo Bay, the notorious prison in Cuba. It's often the first place people think of when military prisons are discussed. But while Guantanamo has garnered attention, many other similar facilities have flown under the radar. These military prisons operate outside the civilian justice system, meaning they aren't held to the same rules and regulations as ordinary prisons. And when it comes to secrecy, they're even more difficult to track down. These military prisons are often used for individuals accused of terrorism or espionage. But what makes them so controversial is that they don't always follow the same legal processes we expect from regular criminal justice systems. People can be detained indefinitely, often without being charged or given a trial. The conditions inside these facilities can be harsh, and like black sites, many of these prisons have been linked to human rights violations, including torture and forced confessions. The secrecy surrounding these military prisons is no accident. The government has made it clear that these facilities are vital for national security, but the lack of transparency raises serious concerns. How can we ensure justice if we don't even know what's going on behind those walls? The answer is simple: we can't. And while Guantanamo Bay remains the most well-known, there are more military prisons on U.S. soil that we don't hear about. These hidden facilities continue to operate largely out of the public's view, and the lack of information makes it impossible to fully understand how many people are being detained there, or what treatment they might be facing. So, why is all of this happening? Why are there so many secret prisons, detention centers, and black sites that operate out of the public's view? The answer lies in power, profit, and a lack of accountability. First, there's the issue of national security. For the government, secrecy is often justified as a matter of protecting the country. The argument is that by keeping certain prisons and facilities hidden, they can better protect sensitive information, gather intelligence, or carry out operations without interference. But the problem is, this secrecy often comes at a cost. It leaves the system open to abuse, and without transparency, there's no real way to hold those in charge accountable. Then there's the role of private companies. Many of these secret prisons and detention centers are operated by private businesses, which see prisons as a source of profit. For these companies, secrecy is a way to avoid public scrutiny and legal oversight, allowing them to maximize profits. When money is the main motivator, things like the well-being of prisoners or the conditions inside these facilities often take a back seat. Finally, lack of oversight is a major factor. In some cases, local, state, or even federal governments turn a blind eye to the existence of these secret prisons, allowing them to operate unchecked. Without proper oversight, these facilities can become breeding grounds for abuse and corruption. The more hidden they are, the harder it becomes for anyone to challenge what's happening behind closed doors. What makes this even worse is that the American public, in many cases, doesn't even know these prisons exist. The lack of awareness allows this system to continue, with very few people questioning its existence or calling for change. So, the big question remains: how can we expect a fair and just prison system when so many parts of it are operating in the shadows? The secrecy is a deliberate choice made to protect interests, whether they be political, financial, or security-related. And it's time we start asking why we are allowing these hidden prisons to exist without scrutiny. So, there you have it. The hidden side of America's prison system is much darker than most of us realize. From secret CIA black sites and private prisons running without oversight to hidden immigrant detention centers and military prisons on U.S. soil, these places operate in the shadows, often without accountability, transparency, or respect for human rights. It's easy to forget that the prison system isn't just about the facilities we know. There are countless others, buried under layers of secrecy, where the rules don't apply the way they should. And this is happening right now, all across the country. But here's the thing. Awareness is the first step. By shining a light on these hidden prisons, we can start demanding more accountability, more transparency, and a system that treats everyone with dignity and respect. So, the next time you hear about a prison, just remember, not all of them are what they seem. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we stop letting these dark corners of the system stay hidden. Thanks for watching. And if you found this video eye-opening, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more deep dives into the things we don't talk about enough.